Good morning and welcome to the July 18th Victim Compensation Board meeting. For those of you in the room who are appearing on a specific agenda item or wish to offer public comment, the microphones at the podium and tables are directional and require that you hold them fairly close to your mouth when speaking to ensure your testimony is captured by our audio equipment. For members and participants who are appearing via Zoom, if you cannot hear the presenter, please use the comment feature to note that as staff are monitoring the comments in real time. Council, would you please call the roll?
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Chair Ravel.
Present.
Good morning, everyone. Item 1 is the approval of the minutes for the May 16, 2024 board meeting.
Is there any discussion, additions, or corrections to the minutes from the board? Do I have a motion to approve item 1?
I move to approve item 1.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location?
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is approval of the May 16th, 2024 meeting minutes. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda, as any items discussed during public comment have not been agendized. The board is not permitted to take any action on these matters at this meeting. Please note, if you wish to offer public comment regarding items 6 through 11, there will be a separate call for public comment when each item is heard by the board. For those on the phone, if you previously indicated your desire to offer comments during this meeting, we will be calling on you by name or phone number. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will acknowledge you and let you know when it is your turn to speak.
I see Ms. Petros. You have your hand raised.
Yes. Good morning, Chairman Ravel, members Becton and Johnson. My name is Margaret Petros. I am a victim advocate and the executive director at the nonprofit Mothers Against Murder, or MAM. I'm requesting that you direct staff to not separate the meeting's agenda items, specifically the closed session agenda item, because it makes no sense to separate that. This is one meeting, one board. It's confusing, it's misleading. To be more specific, when you go to the homepage, you go Cal VCB about meetings, then notice of meetings and meeting material, which common sense says, this is the items where everything is listed on it. But this document excludes the closed session and all the claim numbers being decided by you on the closed session. They've all along been separating that and listing it, which over a year ago, I've experienced where I reviewed the notice and meetings of the meeting material record, and also was present at this meeting by Zoom, but I was not aware that one of our victims' claims was on the agenda for a denial recommendation and was decided on you in the closed session. So I connected with staff to express my concerns. And that's when I figured out it's a separated items, and I believed it was going to be corrected, but still it has not. And that's been the problem, is staff not listening, staff ignoring simple requests. It's silly that I have to come before a public meeting in front of the board members to ask for a simple thing, but although it is simple, it's really serious violation. It really misleads the public. The public has a right to be clear on these items. So please make sure these things that are regular are operated correctly. The other concern I have on this closed session is that 59 claims are recommended for denial and for your decision today in the closed session. The agenda was posted 10 days ago on July 8th. But as you must know by now, the last month on June 21st, the judge ruled in MAM's favor and granted the writ of mandate against Cal VCB that these denials based on hearings on written records is not lawful, that victims have a right to have an in-person hearing, and that the Code of Regulations 647.20.1 is faulty. It is inconsistent with the law. It's troubling that I find still 59 claims agendized to be denied. Although I know you could do it because the written decision is not signed by the judge yet, but it's still a decision that was made, and it's a public record. We've just been working on the language, and my understanding is by tomorrow, our agency attorney will be filing the language and the order with the judge for signature. So please, I'm asking you to respect that decision. It's still 59 cases that should be put on hold today. And I think the chief counsel should have respected the judge's decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. I'll just note that we are discussing that writ proceeding in closed session today. Is there any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, thank you again, Ms. Petros.
Next, we have item 3, which is the Executive Officer's Statement, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Morning. As you all know, the governor signed the state budget in June. It does maintain the administrative cuts that I previewed to the board in May. We continue to work with the Government Operations Agency and Department of Finance to better understand how these proposed cuts which are potentially to both current vacant positions and to our operating budget, will impact Cal VCB. We've already previewed for the administration that we were unable to absorb both of these cuts and maintain our current operations. I expect these conversations will continue throughout the fall, and I will continue to keep the board updated. I do have one piece of good news regarding the budget. In May, I let you know that although the Safe Neighborhood and Schools Fund had increased, there was language in the May revise about not expending one-time funds that met certain criteria, and that the $2.2 million in one-time Trauma Recovery Center funding allocated in the Budget Act of 2022 met this criteria. As I told the board, that cut would result in Cal VCB needing to reduce grants by more than $1.5 million, or 12%. Since the last board meeting, we requested and received an exemption from the administration, and were approved to use that one-time general fund dollars to fund the TRCs at the level approved by the board at the March meeting. We appreciated the Department of Finance working with us on this. We too were concerned about the impact that the funding reductions would have on TRC grantees and the victims they serve. We completed the grants for the 9 board-approved TRCs, and they were effective July 1st, 2024. I also want to share some additional information about our joint powers contracts, which are on the informational contract agenda item today. As I mentioned in my remarks in May, Cal VCB contracts with offices across the state that process applications and bills. These offices are operated by 17 counties, as well as a location in the city of Los Angeles. We receive a local assistance line item in the budget, and we distribute the funding to local governments to perform processing work as outlined in a 3-year contract. Since the last meeting, we have confirmed that San Bernardino County will not be renewing its contract. Therefore, Cal VCB now has contracts with 16 local agencies, and those went into effect this month. The funding that was historically allocated to San Bernardino office will be redistributed to other local offices following assessment of their current funding and staffing. We are aware that certain offices are underfunded based on the amount of staff that they have dedicated to doing this work for Cal VCB. However, because the budget line item is static, there are not a lot of opportunities to increase the money in these contracts. To maintain a seamless process without impacting victims, the claim processing work that San Bernardino office had been performing has been routed to headquarters. Headquarters is either processing these claims or redistributing them to other JP offices. I have a couple updates regarding the Forced or Involuntary Sterilization Compensation Program, or FISP. We have received updates from our government partners regarding the memorial markers. We are pleased that many of these memorials have been installed at both CDCR, state hospitals, and the Department of Developmental Services. The memorials range from benches to small gazebos to artwork. We have also closed out our contract with the Alliance for a Better Community, or ABC, that we had initiated as required by the Budget Act of 2021. This $300,000 contract required ABC to conduct outreach to survivors of forced or involuntary sterilization at the previously named Los Angeles County Hospital, currently named the Los Angeles County and USC Medical Center. The study explored the lived experiences of victims and their families, identified potential barriers to identifying victims, and examined the context of cases of coerced sterilization. After extensive outreach in the Los Angeles region, ABC ultimately interviewed 10 self-identified victims. They found that most of these women were sterilized via tubal ligation as part of a C-section. Only one woman had retained relevant medical records. They all recounted the many ways that forced sterilization negatively impacted their physical and mental health, as well as their personal relationships. We believe that ABC is going to finalize their report and post it publicly in the next few weeks. Cal VCB is also in the middle of developing our next 4-year strategic plan that will guide the organization from 2025 to 2028. As part of this process, we are surveying stakeholders about input to Cal VCB's area of excellence and opportunity for improvements. We're also surveying staff. I've also started one-on-one meeting with key stakeholder groups to obtain additional feedback. We continue these meetings, and the conversations have been very helpful in terms of reiterating many ways Cal VCB services can help people rebuild their lives, as well as identifying opportunities for improved outreach, communications, and efficiencies. Finally, I want to take a moment to let you know about some executive staff updates. After a remarkable nearly 32 years in state service, our Victim Compensation Program Deputy Executive Officer Vincent Walker is retiring. Vincent has spent those 32 years at just two state departments, Cal VCB and EDD. He's been instrumental in leading many improvements to the victim compensation program, many of which you've heard about during his presentations to the board. Although we will miss him, we wish him a very happy and fulfilling retirement. Recognize the importance of this position in our organization. We began recruitments early and are happy to share that Jennifer Roto joined our organization yesterday as our new Deputy Executive Officer for Victim Compensation Program. Jennifer joins us from the Civil Rights Department, where she served as Assistant Deputy Director in the Enforcement Division. She oversaw a large team of investigators and technical staff working to protect the people of California from unlawful discrimination. Prior to her work there, she worked as an Assistant Division Chief at CalPERS and had several leadership roles in the State Controller's Office. We also have a new Chief Information Officer who started on Monday, Leo Adrenalan. Leo has 25 years of management experience in the state. He comes to Cal VCB from the Department of Child Support Services, where he managed application development and testing branch. He's also worked at the natural resources agencies, and he has specialized skills in various data platforms, application development, and project manager. We're very excited to have Jennifer and Leo join our executive team, and I know the board joins me in wishing Vincent all the best in his retirement. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Officer Gledhill. Really terrific news about the TRC funding. I think we've all heard many times about how painful those cuts are. And so I'm relieved that it's not going to be even more significant. And most importantly, congratulations to Mr. Walker. And I want to say I really appreciated all your many years of wise counsel and dedication, and really your dedication shines through. And so I'm really happy for you, and we'll certainly miss you. But 32 years of state service is very impressive, and I think that speaks to your character and the kind of person that you are. So thank you very much. And welcome to Jennifer and Leo. We're really happy to have you. Any questions or comments from the board?
No, I just want to echo the sentiment about the TRC funding. Really appreciate the willingness to push to maintain that funding. I know how critical it is, and those extra dollars are more meaningful than just the dollars, right? And so really appreciate the effort you all put in on that.
Thank you. We will move to item 4, which is the legislative update, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Katie Gardinas.
Use this as we try to fix the microphone so that the folks on Zoom can hear us better.
Testing, testing.
Hey. Check, check. Check, check.
Testing. All right. I'm going to start at the beginning. When we last met, the Senate and Assembly Appropriations Committees were meeting to hear bills on the suspense file. You will see in the report that several of the bills we have been following were held in the committees and will not move forward, including AB 2307 by Assemblymember Davies and SB 1430 by Senator Glazer. Among the bills that did move forward are AB 2979 by Assemblymember Fong, which was signed by the governor on July 15th and took immediate effect. This bill clarifies that victim compensation and Good Samaritan payments received from CalVCB are excluded from the definition of gross income under the Revenue and Taxation Code. AB 1186 by Assemblymember Bonta, which has been on the inactive file since 2023, was recently brought back and significantly amended. This bill would provide that restitution fines against both adult and juvenile offenders would be deemed uncollectible after 10 years of imposition. It would also remove authority for the imposition of certain mandatory restitution fines against juvenile offenders. The bill is scheduled to be heard in the Senate Appropriations Committee on August 5th. Those are my highlights, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Cardenas. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or the Martinez location? Seeing none. We will now move to item 5, which is a contract update, and it will be presented by Executive Officer Sean Ramirez.
Good morning. The items for today's contract report consist of administrative amendments to the criminal restitution compacts, the joint power agreements for the term of July 1st to 2024 through June 30th, 2027, and standard operational contracts. These items are informational and do not require board action, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Ramirez. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location? Margaret Petros.
Yes, Margaret Petros, a victim advocate, executive director with Mothers Against Murder. Just a quick look at the budget. And I'm seeing some disparities between the joint powers in different offices. I've not really had much chance to look closely at it, but also wanting to bring attention of the board members as well as the public that really close attention need to be paid to the performance and the amount of claims or funds that are being brought to victims in the individual counties. For example, if Santa Clara County, the county I am very familiar with, my jurisdiction is getting $3.399 million for joint powers contracts. When looking at the amount of money that was brought for victims in Santa Clara County, I believe last fiscal year, the 22-23, was only about $800,000. If you are paying them almost $3.4 million, figure out the cost. What private business could possibly operate at such a high cost? I mean, if we were to just not have processing, close our eyes and pay victims, we'd be paying them $5 million without administrative costs and be able to help a lot more victims. The cost per dollar, for every dollar that's going to victim, it must be at least 1.75. The cost is huge. It is baffling. It's unbelievable. And I'm going to look much closely at it, but just as again, a quick look, you really need to look closely and pay attention to the productivity and how much help is coming to victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petros.
Thank you. Item 6 is the request for authorization to begin rulemaking process for amendments to the California Code of Regulations, and it will be presented by Senior Attorney Laura Simpson.
Hi, good morning, Chair and board members. Oh, how's this? Is this better? All right. Good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Laura Simpson. I'm a senior attorney at Cal VCB, and I'm the lead coordinator for Penal Code Section 4900 claims. Staff is requesting authorization to begin the rulemaking process to amend the regulations governing Penal Code Section 4900 claims, as well as the claim form. The regulations and claim form were last updated in 2022. Since then, there's been several statutory revisions. Several statutory provisions for processing these claims were amended by SB 78, and that went into effect in January of 2024. As a result, some aspects of the current regulations and claim form are outdated or inconsistent with the current law. Meanwhile, Cal VCB has also experienced a significant increase in the number of claims that were received. For example, received claims rose by 139% between 2021 to 2023, yet the number of approved claims increased by just 57%, and the number of rejected or denied claims increased by 144%. So the proposed amendments to the regulations, as well as the updated claim form, will ensure consistency with the current law. They'll provide additional clarity for processing claims and determining eligibility. And they'll also include non-substantive changes that render the regulations and claim form easier to understand, especially for claimants who are not represented. So a draft of the proposed regulations and the revised claim form are attached to the board materials for this item, along with the public notice and the initial statement of reasons. A copy of the current claim form is also included for comparison. When drafting our proposed regulations, Cal VCB reached out to various stakeholders, including the Attorney General and Innocence Project, for their informal feedback. Only the AG responded with one suggested edit, which has been incorporated into the draft with you. If the board approves the staff's request, just as an overview of what would happen next, the draft regulations and the related documents will be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law in order to commence the official rulemaking process. And as part of that process, all stakeholders and the general public will have an opportunity to submit comments during a 45-day period. Any received comments will be carefully considered, and if warrant, it may result in additional revisions. Those revisions in turn may trigger an additional comment period of either 15 days for minor changes or 45 days for major changes. No hearing is currently contemplated, but one will be scheduled upon timely request for a date to be determined after the 45-day period concludes. So once the comment period is complete and the language of the proposed regulations is settled, then staff will return to the board and we will have a separate request for you to adopt the proposed regulations and authorize filing those, the record with OAL. And then if granted, OAL will review those regulations and if approved, file them with the Secretary of State. So that's down the road, but for right now, staff is just requesting authorization to begin the rulemaking process. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have about this agenda item.
Thank you, Council. I'm very pleased to hear that VCB reached out to affected stakeholders on this one for a preview. I think that's a a best practice and certainly a good way to get some of the issues out in the open so that you know what to expect and make any changes that might be needed on the front end. Are there any questions or comments on this item from the board?
Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location? Seeing none.
Do I have a motion to approve item 6?
Move to approve.
Second.
Council, please call the roll.
The pending motion is authorization for the executive officer to begin the rulemaking process for the amendments to the California Code of Regulations, specifically Title II, Section 640 et sec, and to execute and submit any required documents to the Office of Administrative Law. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 7 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Clayborn Dennis, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
On July 23rd of 2021, Clayborn Dennis submitted an application to the California Victim Compensation Board as an erroneously convicted felon. That application was supplemented in August and September of 2021, and it is based on his 1998 conviction for second-degree murder. The claim seeks $1,566,040 for 11,186 days imprisonment. The Attorney General objected to the claim, arguing the evidence fails to prove Mr. Dennis's innocence. As explained in detail in the proposed decision, the claim is recommended for denial as Mr. Dennis has failed to meet his burden of showing by a preponderance of the evidence that he is innocent of the challenged conviction under the law as it existed when the crime was committed, as required by Penal Code Section 4900, Subdivision A. Throughout these proceedings, Mr. Dennis has been represented by Attorney Jeffrey Mendelman, and the Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Jessica Leal.
Thank you, Council. We'll hear first from Mr. Mendelman.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board. First off, I just heard that the conviction was listed as from 1998. That's incorrect. This was a conviction from 1988. And I would assume that the board has read and considered all the documents that I submitted, including my July 2nd brief. So I'm not going to go back through all of that, but I'll just ask a simple question, which is, what has the system done for Clayborn Dennis? As a 16-year-old, it ripped him from his mother and charged him with a crime and treated him as an adult for punching somebody a single time. That's the only competent evidence that there really is. And so I understand that the hearing officer who wasn't present at the hearing went back through the record and pulled a bunch of what I would consider to be incompetent evidence to cobble together some sort of alternative theory that was never actually founded in anything competent to claim that we didn't meet our burden of proof. But I think although he has been released because he was resentenced and the murder conviction was reversed, and he was resentenced to assault by means likely to cause great bodily injury, it still isn't really justice. It's not really justice to rip a 16-year-old from his mother, throw him into prison for 34 years, and then say, well, you can go back out on the street now. And so Martin Luther King said, the time is always right to do what is right. And what is right in this instance is to compensate him for sitting in prison for over 3 decades for punching somebody one time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendelman. I understand Mr. Dennis is not in attendance. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, we will hear next from Ms. Leal from the Attorney General's office.
Good morning. The Attorney General asks that the board adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision. Claimant has failed to carry his burden of innocence of murder in the second degree. The evidence shows that claimant set in motion the events that led to the victim's death. that he was a key participant in the beating that left the victim motionless on the ground, that he then recruited other gang members and participated in the larger beating, and that he lingered around as the victim lay naked and dead on the ground. 4 different witnesses gave statements consistent with these facts. And Clayman's own multiple statements over the years support these facts. He's previously accepted full responsibility as the initiator of the fatal beating and as a person who brutally fought the victim with everything within him. These are his words. Clayman now minimizes his role in the beating in an attempt to receive compensation, but the record realized that assertion. In his comments on the proposed decision, he oddly claims that his own statements before the parole board are not to be trusted because they were an attempt to gain a parole date. It does not help Clayman's innocence claim to say that he was willing to say whatever was necessary in order to obtain a significant benefit. He undermines his own credibility in so saying, as it leaves open the possibility that his claim of innocence now is also an attempt to obtain another significant benefit. Ultimately, the state of the evidence is such that Clayman cannot demonstrate his innocence, and the Attorney General asked the board to adopt the decision, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Leal. Is there any discussion on this item by the board? Do I have a motion on item 7?
I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation and deny the claim.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or the Martinez location? Seeing
Seeing
none.
none, council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Clayborn Dennis. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 8 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Jafama, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that,
Mhm.
Coleman, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
On March 14th, 2014, Jofama Coleman filed an application with the California Victim Compensation Board as an erroneously convicted felon, which application was supplemented on April 29th of 2024. That application is based on his 2006 conviction for murder, which conviction was vacated in February 2024 pursuant to a grant of habeas corpus. Also in February of 2024, the court granted the motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $907,340, which represents $140 per day for each of the 6,481 days Mr. Coleman was wrongfully imprisoned. Mr. Coleman is represented throughout these proceedings by Attorney Ellen Eggers. The Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Jessica Leal.
Thank you, council. We will hear first from Ms. Eggers.
Thank you. I'm Ellen Eggers, attorney for Mr. Coleman. I will keep it brief. I first of all just want to thank everyone with the Victims' Compensation Board. I'm very proud to be a Californian, one of the states in the United States that now recognizes the injury to wrongfully convicted persons. I think this is a very just outcome, and I want to thank all of the staff who worked on this case. I also want to give a very special thanks to Deputy Attorney General Jessica Leal. She went above and beyond the call of duty in this case. We did not have access to the C file. That's one of the difficulties of presenting a claim, because after someone has been released from prison, access to their own C file becomes, oops, is that mine? I think it's, oh, sorry, I thought I turned it off. it becomes very difficult to get access to the C file. And Ms. Leal, as the deputy AG, was able to get it more quickly than I was able to under the circumstances when it goes to archives. And she really worked hard to find the documents that we believed were in the C file, because my client did remember a certain date, and that became very crucial, and it very much helped the claim. And I so appreciate the effort that she made. And with that, I'll close, but I do want to introduce my clients so you can get to know a little bit about them too. Jofama Coleman, please come up.
Speech, keep this short. So, yeah, Jessica Leal. Yeah, she's kind of like a superhero for me right now. So my situation either makes you better or bitter, right? And I think I became better because of people like her. You know, I fought on my own for a long time, but when people like Ellen Eggers, Jessica Leal comes into play, it makes my fight a lot easier. So yeah, thank you. And I also didn't allow my situation to cause me to become bitter because of my daughter, Jocelyn Coleman. You know, as I sat and falsely accused of a crime I didn't commit, you know, I didn't sit idly on my hands. I educated myself, upgraded it, you know, got, I think, 3 associate degrees, paralegal diplomas, yada, yada, yada. So I'm so nervous. So basically, I just want to say, you know, although I went through some very tough times, I think I ultimately triumphed because of, you know, processes like this, the Victims Compensation Board, you know, attempting to right wrongs. So I'll keep it short and just leave it at that. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Eggers and Mr. Coleman. I understand Ms. Coleman might like to address the board as well. Would you like to address the board, Ms. Coleman? Oh, no pressure. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. We will hear now from Ms. Leal from the Attorney General's office.
Hello again. The Attorney General's office was not involved in the factual innocence litigation in the Superior Court, aside from receiving notice from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and agreeing that factual innocence concession was due in this case, was appropriate in this case. The Attorney General was only involved in litigating the issue of injury. I would like to thank counsel for her patience and her civility and her outstanding advocacy for her client, Mr. Coleman. This is one of those happy cases. I am very happy to be here for this, to witness this. And we have agreed, after a lot of emails back and forth, I've agreed on the right amount of compensation. And with that, I would ask the board to adopt the proposed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leal. Is there any discussion on this item by the board? Well, thank you, counsel, for your advocacy in this case. Do I have a motion on item 8?
I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation on item 8.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or the Martinez location? Seeing none.
Counsel, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Jafama Coleman. Member Becton.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 9 is the Penal Code Section 4900 for Truman Simon, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
On March 23rd of 2022, Truman Simon filed an application with the California Victim Compensation Board as an erroneously convicted felon. That application is based on his 2018 convictions as an aider and abettor to assault with a firearm and criminal threats. The claim seeks $154,560 for 1,104 days imprisonment. The Attorney General objected to the claim, arguing the evidence fails to prove Mr. Simon's innocence. As you are aware, the board first considered this claim at its meeting in March of 2024 and remanded the matter back to the hearing officer to address certain issues. As explained in detail in the proposed decision on remand, the claim is recommended for denial as Mr. Simon has failed to meet his burden of showing by a preponderance of the evidence that he is innocent of the challenged convictions as required by Penal Code Section 4900, Subdivision A. Throughout these proceedings, Mr. Simon represented himself. The Office of the Attorney General today is represented by Deputy Attorney General Jessica Leal.
Thank you, counsel. I understand Mr. Simon is not in attendance. He's not online, is he? No. Okay. Well, then we will hear from Ms. Leal from the Attorney General's office.
Hello again. The Attorney General asks that the board adopt the hearing officer's revised proposed decision. It is worth emphasizing that the appellate court's decision and comments regarding the weight of the evidence are not binding upon this board, and the board can and should make its own findings based on the evidence before it. A court's invalidation of a conviction due to insufficiency of the evidence is not equivalent to a finding of factual innocence. This is why a person acquitted of murder, for instance, may still be held civilly liable for wrongful death. Evidence that is not enough to establish guilt by the higher standard can still establish liability by a lower standard. It is also worth emphasizing that it is not the Attorney General's burden to establish guilt in this case. While the appellate court stated that there was no evidence that claimant shared the gunman's criminal purpose and that there was no evidence that he intended to aid and abet any crimes, those statements by the court were made in light of the standard of review in that proceeding, which was the sufficiency of the evidence standard. That is evidence that is reasonable, credible, and of solid value, from which a reasonable trier of fact could find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That is not the standard here, and it is not the Attorney General's burden to carry. The board does not have to accept those characterizations by the court, which were again made in light of the applicable standard of review. The board can credit the reasonable inferences to be made from the circumstantial evidence that the Court of Appeal did not think met the burden there, as there is a lower standard at play here, which must be met by claimant. The question before this board is whether claimant has proved his innocence by preponderance of the evidence. The evidence shows that claimant and two others engaged in a bar fight where claimant's cousin was arrested. That about an hour later, claimant and those same two others knocked on the victim's door, asking about said bar fight. That the three men stood in a semicircle at the door, with the one in the middle pointing a gun at the victim, and the claimant was the most vocal of the three. This does not spell innocence. Although the existence of this evidence curtails claimants of innocence, it is the absence of evidence of actual innocence that forecloses claimant's claim. Claimant did not put any evidence to prove that he did not share the gunman's purpose or that he did not intend to aid and abet the assault or the criminal threats. When this board remanded this case to the hearing officer, claimant took no action still. Notably, claimant is not here today, presumably because he's in prison pursuant to conviction of criminal threats. The board has previously characterized this case as a closed case. But as the Second District Appellate Court stated in its most recently published decision regarding Section 4900 cases where the claimant bears the preponderance of the evidence burden, and the case would be Gonzalez versus California Victim Compensation Board, that in cases where the evidence is in equipoise, that tie must be resolved against the inmate as the party assigned the burden and against relief. As such, even assuming this is a case that can be considered a tie, it must be resolved against claimant. The Attorney General therefore asks that the board adopt the proposed decision, and I welcome any questions by the board at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Leal. Is there any discussion or questions on this item from the board? Do I have a motion on item 9?
I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location? Seeing none.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Truman Simon. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 10 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Abraham Villalobos, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
Items 10 and 11 on your agenda, as you probably noticed, are related claims for relief under Penal Code Section 4900. First, we will consider the claim filed by Abraham Villalobos, whose application was filed on May 6th of 2024. That application for relief is based on his 2001 conviction for second-degree murder with enhancement for committing the crime for the benefit of a criminal street gang. Those convictions were vacated in March of 2024 pursuant to a grant of habeas corpus. Also in March of 2024, the court granted the motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and Section 1485.55, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $788,060, which represents $140 per day for the 5,629 days Mr. Villalobos was wrongfully imprisoned. Mr. Villalobos, throughout these proceedings, has been represented by Joseph Trujillo, and the Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Catherine Althizer.
Thank you, Council. We will hear first from Mr. Trujillo.
Good morning. I'm with Joe Trujillo with a Lift Project for the Innocent for Mr. Villalobos. Mr. Villalobos could not be here today. Unfortunately, he was in fact deported to Mexico as a result of this wrongful conviction. That's what is being explained. But on his behalf, I just want to express deep gratitude to the board and to Deputy Attorney General Catherine Althizer, who worked so diligently on making this come together. And I just want to say, I'll keep it brief, that beyond giving Mr. Villalobos the practical help, obviously, to get his life back together, this means so much more that the state of California and this board acknowledges his innocence, and this brings him some measure of justice. And so we just want to express our gratitude and we're greatly appreciative. He is a new father, he's a husband, he's a brother, and this restores the full respect that he deserves. And on a personal note, I just want to thank your staff and everyone on the board for the respect and courtesy that was shown us as we submitted this application and went through this process. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo. We'll hear now from Ms. Althizer.
Good morning. The Attorney General was not involved in the factual litigation, the finding of factual innocence litigation below, other than we did receive notice from the DA's office and we agreed with their findings that the finding of factual innocence was warranted in this case. And the parties agree on the amount of compensation, and so we request that the board adopt the proposed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Althizer. Is there any discussion on this item from the board? Do I have a motion on item 10?
I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation. Sorry.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location? Seeing none.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Abraham Villalobos. Member Becton.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 11 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Ronald Velasquez, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
Ronald Velasquez filed an application as erroneously convicted felon with the California Victim Compensation Board on May 7th of 2024. That application is based on his 2001 conviction for first-degree murder with enhancements for the personal use of a firearm and committing the crime for the benefit of a criminal street gang. Those convictions were vacated in March of 2024 pursuant to a grant of habeas corpus. Also in March of 2024, the court granted the motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and consistent with Section 1485.55, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $1,202,180, which represents $140 per day for each of the 8,587 days that Mr. Velasquez was wrongfully imprisoned. Throughout these proceedings, Mr. Velasquez has been represented by John Hunnes, and the Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Catherine Althizer.
Thank you, counsel. We'll hear first from Mr. Hannes.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Very briefly, just wanted to say how grateful we are to the board for its consideration of Mr. Velasquez's claim and to Ms. Althizer for her collaboration in this process. It was an incredibly smooth process, and we're really appreciative of that. Certainly, although no amount of money can make Mr. Velasquez whole after being incarcerated for nearly 24 years for a crime he did not commit, the compensation will greatly assist him in the process of rebuilding his life. So again, we're grateful for the consideration. Mr. Velasquez is here, is present via Zoom, and would like to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Hannes. Mr. Velasquez, please.
I just want to thank the board for allowing me to be here. I'm grateful to be given the opportunity to speak, and I thank the board for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Velasquez. We'll hear now from Ms. Althizer from the Attorney General's office.
Hello again. In this case as well, the Attorney General was not involved in the factual innocence litigation below in the Superior Court, other than we did receive notice from the DA's office and agreed with their concession. And I believe the parties agree on the amount of compensation in this claim as well. And so we asked the board to accept the proposed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Althizer. Is there any discussion on this item from the board? Do I have a motion on item 11?
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Ronald Velasquez.
I second that motion.
Is there any public comment on this item via Zoom here in Sacramento or at the Martinez location? Seeing none.
Counsel, please call the roll.
Motion for consideration is the adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Ronald Velasquez. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Board will now convene into closed session under Government Code Section 11126 sub E to discuss pending litigation, and under sub C3 to discuss numbers 1 through 121 of the Victim Compensation Program.
Pause for a second. Pause for a second.
Okay, the board is reconvening into open session under Government Code Section 11126 sub C3. Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 121 other than number 85 of the Victim Compensation Program? I'll second. Right.
Second.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is approval of numbers 1 through 121 with the exception of number 85 of the Victim Compensation Program. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Is there any other business that needs to come before the board this morning? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move the meeting be adjourned.
And I second.
Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. The next meeting is scheduled to occur September 19th, 2024.
Thank you.